Understanding Bitcoin is no easy task. It is a complicated technology with tons of intricacies that make it really hard to get a grasp on. Even after you learn how Bitcoin works, you need to understand how the current financial system works so that you can understand how Bitcoin revolutionizes it. Here I have compiled a list of books about Bitcoin that will help you to really comprehend what Bitcoin is and how it changes the world. These books are from people with entirely different backgrounds and upbringings. Some of the books are technical, while others are more philosophical. Several have a more conservative perspective, while others have a more liberal one, but all of them have the goal of increasing your knowledge on the complex topic of Bitcoin. The first and probably most well-known book on this list is the Bitcoin Standard. When asking anybody books about Bitcoin that you should read, the Bitcoin Standard will almost always be on the list of recommendations. The book is designed to help you understand the basics of how the current monetary system came to be, how money has worked throughout history, and why Bitcoin is the best way forward. The Bitcoin Standard essentially tries to explain why Bitcoin needs to exist and how it solves the problems with the current financial system. Reading this book will give you a firm grasp of the ideals behind Bitcoin. However, this book is fairly opinionated. Safety and Amos, the author, has a very libertarian point of view that not every reader is going to share. In some chapters, the author even rants about topics that don't always feel as important as he makes them out to be, at least in comparison to the topic of Bitcoin. For some readers, this may make portions of the book harder to read. For others, it may help them connect more deeply with the author if they share the same perspective. Even knowing this, I would still highly recommend the Bitcoin Standard to many people who are new to the Bitcoin space because there is a lot of value there and it is a pretty decent book. The next book I'm going to recommend is Digital Gold by Nathaniel Popper. Digital Gold is one of the earliest books on the subject of Bitcoin. It was published back in 2015 by Nathaniel Popper, a New York Times journalist. It covers the history of Bitcoin from before its inception up until March 2014. The book focuses on the major players in the Bitcoin space during its early years. People like the Winklevoss twins, Ross Ulbricht, who was the creator of the black market site The Silk Road, and even the anonymous creator of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto, is covered fairly extensively here. The point of this book is to give an idea of how the early years of Bitcoin played out. It answers the questions of who got into Bitcoin, why did they like it, and what did they do to increase awareness of it. It's a very detailed and interesting book that will definitely be the basis of an HBO show at some point in the future. Digital Gold is a book that is a must-read for anyone who has an interest in Bitcoin. It shows how Bitcoin rose from a niche technology to somewhat mainstream success. The early years of Bitcoin really helped to solidify what Bitcoin became and how the community would grow to what it is today. So if you're really interested in Bitcoin, I think reading about its early history is very important as well. The next book on this list is Mastering Bitcoin by Andreas Antonopoulos. And Mastering Bitcoin is the best technical book about Bitcoin out there. It covers every single aspect of how Bitcoin works, from mining difficulty to transaction fees. If there's something you want to know about Bitcoin, it's covered here. The book goes through every aspect of Bitcoin's code and explains how it functions. While the book was written for those who want to understand Bitcoin's code, it also explains how aspects of it work in simpler terms as well. So don't think that you need to know how to code to get something out of this book. The author, Andreas Antonopoulos, is one of the most knowledgeable people in the world when it comes to the subject of Bitcoin. In 2012, he started learning about Bitcoin and began dedicating his life to it, particularly by helping others understand how it works and why it is important. He has a YouTube channel that you can check out if you want to get a better idea of what he is all about. He has some great talks about what Bitcoin is for very, very beginners. If you want to be one of the most knowledgeable people on the topic of Bitcoin, this book is an absolute must. He also has a similar book covering the topic of Ethereum, if you're interested in that as well. The next book on this list is A Progressive's Case for Bitcoin by Jason Meyer. A Progressive's Case for Bitcoin has a title that perfectly explains what the book is about. It is a progressive view of how Bitcoin can be beneficial to the world. The book covers topics that are extremely important to progressives such as climate change, wealth inequality, and racism. It takes those topics and shows how Bitcoin could be a valuable asset for those problems that progressives hold so dear. The author himself, Jason Meyer, wrote this book as a response to the growing conservative community within the Bitcoin space. While many conservative viewpoints were being discussed, not many of the more progressive ideas were being attached to Bitcoin. This caused many on the progressive side of the political spectrum to feel that Bitcoin was a bad thing. As a progressive, he wanted other progressives to see what an asset Bitcoin could be for the things that they believe in. A Progressive's Case for Bitcoin is a great book if you're looking to understand Bitcoin from that point of view. As a progressive, it could help you understand how Bitcoin farthers your personal beliefs. If you aren't a progressive, it could help you to reach out and answer those questions that progressives in your life may have about Bitcoin. It's definitely a really good book to kind of balance out your perspective on Bitcoin and how it can help people with many different types of ideologies. So those are the few books that I wanted to talk about that directly discuss discuss Bitcoin, but there are a few other books I want to mention here that, while they don't explicitly talk about Bitcoin, they are great to read and are recommended by many Bitcoiners within the community because they are fairly relevant to the topic. The first one is Debt the First 5,000 Years. Debt the First 5,000 Years is a book frequently recommended by some of the most prominent people in the Bitcoin space. The book takes a hard look at where money comes from and comes to the conclusion that the credit theory of money is correct. The credit theory of money is the idea that money is derived from debt and not the intrinsic value of the items that are being traded. This book is great if you are looking to understand how money has evolved throughout history and brought us to where we are today. It provides a lot of insight into why something like Bitcoin can exist and can be valuable. And the other book I want to talk about is Cryptonomicon. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail about this book because it is the only fiction book on this list. It was written in 1999, nearly a decade before Bitcoin was even created. And within the book, it describes a currency that operates similarly to how Bitcoin operates today, which is really interesting. The book also touches on other things that are important to Bitcoin, such as decentralization and cryptography. As somebody who's into Bitcoin, if you want to read a fiction book, especially like a speculative fiction book, this is definitely worth your time. Bitcoin is an extremely complicated technology that takes a lot of time to fully understand. One of the best ways to grasp it as an idea is through reading. Reading an entire book about a subject as complicated as Bitcoin may seem like a daunting task at first, but once you get into it, you'll find that you're learning more than you ever have. The books on this list aren't the only good books about Bitcoin. There are plenty more out there, depending on what exactly you are looking to understand about it. I just didn't want to add a ton here to overwhelm people who are new to the space. The few books here are just a few that I've read and are frequently recommended within the community. Hopefully this list is a good jumping off point and that you are able to find more book recommendations after you read some of these. And if you like this video and want to learn a little more about Bitcoin, why not check out my video on 5 essential things everyone should know about Bitcoin.